Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for our discussion that we've been going through with the community and addictions. And we're so thankful that we can release these discussions to you and that you're getting tools and information as we have this. And it's been a while since our last one. The summer has been very busy for all of us. Yes. But it's been very fruitful and exciting nonetheless. Today we're going to kind of anchor our discussion around the idea of mending relationships. When we read the Bible and we see what the scriptures say about this, we read that our God is a God who restores. He is about restoration, about healing of relationships, and so that's key in what we do, both not just with our own relationships to Him, but maybe even relationships that we have with other people. And now with relationships and the offenses that come in, what we find is that the breaking of the relationship is we've been centering it around the addict and the community around them. But I also kind of want to put it in this way, where you have, when it comes to the breaking of a relationship, you have the offender, the one who's maybe broken the standard or crossed the line, or broken that boundary that should not have been broken, and then you have the offended, and that's the one who was crossed, the ones whose boundaries were violated, and so you have those two different varieties right there. And maybe for the sake of just kind of contextualizing it to our discussion, we see that in the offender camp you have the addict, because of what's doing and the boundaries that are being crossed by them, and then the community around him as the offended ones, the ones that their boundaries were crossed, or their trust in the individual might have been fractured in some form.
Right.
And so go ahead and some ideas on this.
Well, so for me, in my addiction, I was not very respectful or caring to other people. Mm-hmm. And I broke a lot of those relationships by the things that I was doing, and not only those relationships, but relationships that I didn't of people I had no idea who Right. they were, because I had done some things that affected other people in the community that I did not know. So
I guess that's really good, because sometimes I guess I don't think about that, like,
right.
In terms of maybe for somebody watching these, your addict is your teenager, your child, and they're doing things that are breaking your trust. But then because there's community around your family, the family there, that's already being violated, there's trust that they have with others that is being broken because of this one. Is that going too far? Like you're breaking a chain link fence, and so you're breaking one link over here with this family and breaking that, if I can use breaking the chain
right.
as a breach of the trust. But because that is broken, now there's a weakness that affects the other people trusting
Sure.
the closest. I'm trying to understand that.
Right. I was thinking more broader,
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily people who were connected to those who love me or anything else, but just a general, breach of just a general trust that somebody has that they're not going to be affected by my behavior.
Right.
And they were, and so and there's a reason why I'm saying that, and we'll get into that a little bit. But so for me, the more that I broke that relationship, mm-hmm. the more secluded I became, and mm-hmm. the less I cared about other relationships. It's kind of strange, because it's a cycle that causes, for me, it was a cycle that put me into a spin where suddenly I was alone, mm-hmm. and being left alone with myself, it was never a good idea.
Right.
Just in general, but then you add meth on top of that, and it becomes a real mess.
Right.
And I don't want to talk too much about how those relationships were broke or whatever.
No, that's
because it's just I'm sure most people can figure that out. Like maybe they got stolen from or lied to or manipulated,
right.
or and those people who are the closest and love you the most,
mm-hmm.
they want to deny to themselves that okay, maybe his intention was different, whatever.
Right.
But eventually it breaks, and they decide, I can't do this.
And I think that's very wise for us to avoid the details of why those relationships were fractured.
Right.
One, because it is so varied. There's so many different individuals. And two, that's not the focus of this discussion.
Right.
We're talking about the breach.
Right.
And what can we do to make amends?
Right.
And then, so we're only focusing on those two portions, and then and not getting focused on the details because of that. And then a side objective in avoiding those details on why we're not addressing the details of why the fractures occurred. It's allowing us, and again, it meets the parameters of this discussion. Is I'm protecting those boundaries.
Right.
And so that there is some boundary protection just within this own discussion by avoiding certain details that are just not entirely germane to what we're talking about.
Right. And the people that that happened with me I'm not sure that it's necessary for them to have to relive some of that.
No, absolutely.
So that's why, and in a general sense, I think that most people can they can relate to how someone may have breached their trust or whatever, and so I don't know about the details about that.
No,
but
that's wise.
So I had destroyed a lot of my relationships. Most of it was with my family because they just they just couldn't trust me anymore, and I want to say that some of my friends, that's how it was, but the truth of the matter is that my friends at that time weren't really my friends because they were using too, because that's the only people I was around, and I look back now and I'm like, all they cared about was
the next thing.
When, how we could do this or to get high, when were we going to get high? And that's what that bond was. And there was nothing else. And the further I get along in recovery, the more I see and realize that, I was holding on to something that wasn't real and wasn't there.
Well, so maybe going back to like a previous discussion that we had, you had isolated yourself. And that isolation occurs out of the breaches, out of the fracturings of trust. Mm-hmm. And then your friends are like, well, I'm not alone. I got my friends. I got my crew that I hang out with. Well, they're all users as well, who have also experienced the same fracturing and breaching of their relationships. And so you have a no trust situation over here and a no trust situation over there, and you come together in your no trust.
Right.
And that's what I guess.
And you're really suspicious of that person all the time, anyhow. But and I feel like so previously somewhere along the line, I remember saying that that at a certain point the lights go out, and that I feel like that happens with most addicts. I think some of them are able to get out prior to that,
right?
And because our purpose is that we want to try and get it before that,
right?
I kind of lost track of where I was going with that. But what I'm saying is that when the lights go out, you don't care who you're around anymore. Right. It doesn't matter. I I was like, I don't care anything about you.
Right.
But you got that next hit, so I'm gonna at least tolerate you.
Right.
And I felt like that happened a lot with me too, But to get to kind of the other side of it, I feel like in order to repair some of those relationships, like for me, it was like, okay, I've been clean for 60 days, 90 days. We should be able to, get it together, like, why is this, but they're so scared because that's such a small amount of time.
Right.
Even though I was feeling good and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore and I'm just done with it. It didn't matter because their trust was so fractured that they were scared, literally scared to repair it because, I'm not sure how they felt. I guess I should say. Yeah. All I can think of is that I felt like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Why are people not?
Right.
And I had to stop looking at it like, they should be on my timeline because that was completely wrong.
Right.
Because that's not how it works.
No.
And for me it was consistency.
Right.
And it was progressing in my life. It wasn't, like I'm just walking this same path.
Right.
Of, okay, I'm not going to use, but I'm not really improving in my life. It was when they started, I feel like it was when they started to see things in my life like that would be considered successes, and goals that I was meeting, and my world became a little bit bigger, and and so there was. It took time.
Right. Well, and that's what's. Sorry to interject here. I grew up on I appreciate the wisdom in my parents and particularly my mom. Is as a teenagers you go through those rebellious stages, and my it varying degrees, and there was a moment where my parents made sure that I understood that I had did something that broke their trust with me.
Right.
And my mom told me, she goes, look, it takes a second to break trust.
Right.
And it takes years and years and years to rebuild it.
To repair.
And so in my whole life, just with my own upbringing, and that was told to me many times in various forms, that trust can be broken in an instant, but it takes great amounts of effort and time to rebuild it, and that's the truth. You don't realize how quick that can happen, but then the amount of repair that's involved.
Right. But once it begins to repair, it seems like it goes fairly quickly.
Yes.
But one of the things I wanted to say is that for me, I felt alone. Mm-hmm. And I was depressed, and I had anxiety issues, and I'm talking about when I was using and when I first got into recovery, and that there was a lonely feeling that you get, that gets real deep, and you consider things that are just insane, like suicide, or just. You almost abuse yourself when you're an addict. You starve yourself. You just weird things that are just a destruction of who you are.
Yeah.
And so when you come out of that, and you feel good about the whole idea that you're starting to put that behind you, it feels. you almost feel like you want to go back when people don't respond right away.
Right.
Because it's like, well, if they ain't going to, I might as well just go back and use.
Well, and it's kind of like the whole idea, like the addict. And we talked about this before, where there's this self-condemnation, this self-hate when it comes to being stuck in that place. And then you're going through the recovery process, and you get those victory moments, like, hey, I'm clean. I've been clean this long. Right. Why don't you trust me? And people are like, oh, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And then your instant thought is, well, if they don't trust me, why am I doing this effort? Right. And then that kind of self, that self, almost, and I don't use the word because it's too strong, but I can't think of another one at the moment. But that self-hate kind of comes back on.
It's self-hate.
It's that self-hate comes back on because, well, they can't trust me. And instead of realizing...
And then you think, well, I'm really not trustworthy, you know?
Right.
And it can be... So, in the beginning, there's a lot of struggles because there's a lot of mountains you gotta get over. And I found that I had to realize that I wasn't doing this so that I could restore the life I had.
Right.
I was doing this because I needed to restore myself.
Right.
And that got me through a lot of that stuff because I stayed focused on the fact that that if I'm no good, what good am I to anybody else?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't mean no good as in like, you know, I'm a bad person.
Right.
I mean like, you know, if I'm using, I'm no good to anybody else anyhow.
So,
I'll never really gain in my life.
Well, and I like how you went to, you were talking about trust.
Yeah.
You're talking about having those little victories.
Right.
And I love that. And so I think something that might be important for on the terms of the recovering addict, instead of like proving to everyone that you're trustworthy,
right,
making it smaller to you to the one in recovery, making it smaller to them, and instead of trying to prove to everybody that you're trustworthy, prove to yourself and so prove to yourself, and so get these we'll call them mountains. And I can conquer that peak. I can conquer this peak. I can conquer that peak. And then what you're doing is over time, you're proving to yourself, hey, I can conquer this, I can conquer this, I can conquer that.
And what it does is it changes the way you think about things when you are able to do that. Because, you know, in the beginning, you're playing these tapes in your head of how terrible of a person you are, you know? So you really need to manage that and you know, and for some people they need counseling. For me, it was meetings. You know, and you know, there was a certain point when I had a bunch of people, like I had said before, who kind of surrounded me and helped me, and it wasn't necessarily because they trusted me.
Right.
It was because they cared. Right. You know, whether it was about my mother, or me, or just the community in general. And they cared enough to say, okay, you know, we see he's trying. You know, we'll give him some protection and kind of help him along, but we're not going to overstep that to a point where he can take advantage. You know, and because that's what an addict does. You know, and I hate saying that because because addicts aren't bad people. Right. You know, it's not like it's a very complex thing, you know, with an addict. You know, they're not bad people. They are doing bad things, and they have lost their mind in a way, and their soul. Yeah. You know, and so...
well, the Bible tells us that apart from God, apart from Jesus, that men's inclinations are... they're dark and evil all the time. And so, like, as a believer, you know, I take them like, okay, yeah. So if you don't have Christ in you, my expectations are very small. Right. And it's not that I'm looking down at you. I'm as a pastor, one of the things I get to enjoy is meeting with people and seeing their potential, their potential socially, and their potential in Christ. And so for me, I see someone and I'm like, okay, great, you can do this. And now notice the words I'm using here. You can do it. Right. You know, the Bible says that we can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. Okay, So right there, we see this, that the emphasis is not on, hey, can you do this for me?
Right.
I'm keeping me out of the equation. You do this for you. You strengthen. You can do this. You got the ability. But then like I like what you also said about the like making sure that the addict does not abuse the privilege of rebuilding that trust. If I'm framing it right with my perspective here, that even though we're in this process of rebuilding trust and giving them opportunities and surrounding them, having people surround them that are meeting with me, that care about the individual, to put ourselves in the place of the addict, they care about me.
Right.
They see my potential, they see what I can do, and they're giving us that little beginning stages of trust.
Right.
But notice I'm saying beginning stages.
Right.
And that's where, I trust you with this, but not with anything else. And so I'm gonna limit that. It
has to start somewhere.
And that's what those bite-sized pieces, hey, you're gonna eat an elephant tomorrow. How are you gonna tackle the job? Are you gonna sit there and fry the whole thing and then just consume it in one sitting, or are you gonna sit there and just inch by inch until until you work your way through it? And that's kind of the same idea with this rebuilding of trust. Don't just sit there and be like, all right, they're clean, I trust you.
Right.
You're gonna get hurt.
Right.
But if you say, okay, I can trust you with this level, and then that you're affirmed in that, the individual, the addict, they're affirmed in themselves that I can handle that much trust, and so that's a victory mountain. They've conquered that mountain. That's a great job. They've crested that peak. Then the next stage is, okay, here's something bigger for you to handle.
And so for me, that would be something along the lines of amends, and actually really meaning it, because I feel like sometimes that we've said we're sorry so many times,
right, that
it doesn't have the weight that it used to have,
right,
because as an addict it's like, oh, I'm sorry, and they're like, yeah, okay, and
where's the sincerity?
And for me also, there was a point where I was kind of like, well, they understand that I feel bad,
Right.
Well, that's not really true, because somebody needs to have confirmation.
Right.
They need to know that you understand what you did. They need to really, they need to know that you really feel that full effect, and that you have a complete understanding of the violation,
right,
of them,
right,
and so sometimes amends take a long time, because you want to be like, I'm sorry, I know I did this wrong, and I really am sorry, and I didn't, but life has a way of showing you those violations and making you really feel it and understand it. And so then when you get that real understanding and that in-depth, where your feelings and your heart in your head kind of match on those things, that's when you can make a true amend. And people know, because I'll come up to you and be like, what, Pastor, I'm sorry that I kicked your door in,
which never happened, by the way.
No, but I'm saying, I'm sorry, I know that was wrong, and blah blah, and you kind of feeling it, and you're like, does he really understand that? But then there are times when I can come and say the same exact things, but you can see it in my face, in my eyes, you can feel it, like, okay, he really understands.
Yeah.
And that's what some people need in your life. They need to know that you understand what you've done wrong to repair that relationship.
Yeah.
So when I got to that point with just my mother, where, because there was a day when all of a sudden I was like, I really effed up.
Yeah.
And, and I almost got into tears. I mean, you could see that I was tearing up, and I realized how I had really violated her.
Yeah.
Not in a weird,
her trust. You violated her trust.
Yeah. And, and we hugged.
Yeah.
And she cried a little, and I probably did too, but I'm a man, so it probably didn't happen. But
we'll leave that there.
Yeah, but so that was the beginning of a real trust relationship. And it took time. It was 3 years I was clean before that moment really happened.
Right.
And it was amazing because there was a load lifted off of my shoulders because I realized that she really was at a point where she could forgive me. Yeah. And then for her,
right,
I feel like it was a load off of her shoulders.
Oh yeah,
because suddenly she had her son back.
Yeah.
And she realized that I wasn't trying to play games. I wasn't, I was just moving forward in my life, and then I needed her in my life because, I feel like to be successful, you have to have a team of people around you who are encouraging, supportive, and who are probably successful in their own lives.
This account in Scripture in the Old Testament when they were giving the law to the people of Israel. This is how important unity and trust was for the nation. And so God has given the requirements, and you read this in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, and he's given the law to them, and he makes this interesting statement. He says that when you come to offer your sacrifice at the altar, or their version of, with worship, you come to offer your sacrifice to the Lord, and you realize that you have something against there's an offense, there's a rift between you and your brother, referring to, your fellow countrymen. He says, leave it there on the steps. Go and be reunited with your brother, with the one who you offended. Make amends. Then come back and offer your sacrifice and worship.
Right.
It's such a huge thing, even to God. This idea of how can we, that the whole idea of having forgiveness and restoration was so big that God said, you hold off on this worship until you've been restored to the one that you offended, and then you can come and offer it to me. And it's a very interesting thing because Christ came because we've chosen self, and we've done our own selfish things, and we've offended him so greatly. We broke that law, that trust. And here's what's fun. Instead of waiting for us to make that initiation of that trust, he sends his son. And so Jesus comes on the earth, the Son of God, to make amends with us and to make a way for us, so that through his shed blood, because he died on the cross, was buried and rose again on the third day to life, and then and he does that, and he tells us that no one comes to the Father except through me. And so he gives us this avenue of forgiveness so that we can approach. And so this whole idea of asking for forgiveness and making that reference of I need forgiveness, and then forgiveness being offered to us, and I love that because with you and your mom, you had to go and make that reference of I'm sorry, please forgive me, I've wronged you, and then for her, because she's also been needing to extend forgiveness as well, and it was like, well, when is it appropriate to give this? And she has opportunity to take that weight off of her to make that amends. Does that mean it was perfect in the moment? No, absolutely not. There is still bridges that had to be built. There are still things that had to be mended. But the weight was off because you did what you needed to do. She did what she needed to do. And then you both had freedom in that.
Right. And, sometimes making amends and asking for forgiveness isn't, for me, I with her, of course, I didn't go into it with an expectation. I didn't expect her to be like, oh my God, thank you for, I went into it because for me, it was, I needed to do this.
Right.
Because I had really screwed up, and she deserved that.
Right.
Whether she forgives me or not is not the objective.
Right.
The objective was that I needed her to understand that I understood what I did. And so that was really, like, prior to that, there was that little trust that we were talking about, where it's like, okay, he's trying, so we're going to at least help.
Right.
You know, but at that moment, it changed everything, because then suddenly she was open,
right,
to really see me,
right,
you know, instead of seeing that addict, you know.
Well, and
there was a change in her thought process.
There was a change in her thought process, and it was accompanied by the change in your life.
Right.
Like it wasn't just, hey, I need forgiveness.
Right.
I've done this. That request and that request.
And I never actually asked her to forgive.
Yeah, no, but it's that acknowledgement
right.
that, hey, I've wronged you. I'm admitting to this.
Right.
That was accompanied by active changes.
Right.
You know, if it was just wordplay, okay, how the question for me is, how sincere is this?
Right.
But because it was accompanied with these little things that have changed, those little trusts that were starting to occur, those little victories that were happening, because it was accompanied by actual change, and then you come up and you say, hey, this is what's going on, I'm so sorry, I've wrong. It's like, this is powerful.
Right.
Because now it's actions, heart, and mind all coming into one big package.
Right. And, you know, and so as an addict, you know, you really need to, well, I needed to really start making those, rebuilding those bridges.
Right.
You know, because I knew that that they were important.
Right.
And in order for me to continue to be clean and successful, I needed to really build some of those bridges back, and I had sincerity, you know. And here's the weird thing about all of this is that because I've been that jerk,
right,
and that addict, today when something occurs and happens to me, I don't judge it anymore. Right. And it's kind of weird because, you know, I'm like, okay, I unless if I feel like it's purposeful, like they were targeting and just being, you know,
vindictive,
right, or whatever it was, which I don't know that I really had. But what I'm saying is that, you know, I've learned how to not judge something that somebody's done, and how to try and how to forgive that without them actually asking. Because on my end of it, you know, forgiveness isn't about that person.
Right.
Forgiveness is releasing that hardship, or that, you know, that nasty feeling you got, because you feel violated or whatever else. You know, so I kind of have been on both sides of it, and you know, and what I've learned is that if I hold on to things,
right,
it starts to build, and it can be dangerous for me.
Yeah. Well, I've been in that place too.
Sure.
The whole
I think
idea,
everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to you know, varying situations, varying degrees.
Right.
Very hard, very easy, multiple times, and it is true, because I mean, there's been times where it's like I'm not, like there's been moments where I'm like, I'm not willing to forgive. I'm going to hold on to this, and it's like this is more illustrative than factual, but it's almost like this dark cloud just kind of follows your demeanor, and you feel the weight of it. Right. You got this sour disposition about you, and you just.
And the funny thing is that you're probably the only one really thinking about it. Because the person who violated you probably has moved on to something else, you know. So it's really, it's really just destructive.
Yes.
To not be able to forgive, and I'm not saying that people should just forgive, you know, or just be like, okay, I've forgiven you, so now I'm going to trust you. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that, you know, for your own well-being and for your own healthy mind, and you know, you might want to forgive.
Yeah.
But you don't have to forget, and you can allow somebody to. You don't have to rebuild that trust. That's not, you know, that's a choice that you can make.
And that's going to be situation by situation.
Right. You know, and you don't have to be like, okay, I've forgiven him, so I'm going to allow this person to
Yeah.
return. That doesn't have to happen, you
Right.
know. And this is part of the being a healthy community, so that the addict can,
Yeah.
you know, so that we can kind of surround that addict and really keep him in the light,
Yeah.
so that there's no behind the.
Well, and I think it's true, maybe for the sake of what we were just discussing here, is separating the idea of rebuilding trust and forgiveness.
Right.
Like put it in two
I
different.
don't think they're the same.
They're
thing.
not the same thing.
No.
Like for the individual that needs to give forgiveness. So for the offended one,
Right.
you do need to forgive, because you're gonna be clouded. You're gonna be stuck in this place.
Right.
You're gonna be. In fact, even to take a scripture, the Bible says if you withhold forgiveness from someone, forgiveness can be withheld from you.
Right.
And so there is this very spiritual thing that forgiveness is powerful, and it has to occur. So you can forgive someone who's offended you, and that can take time. That can take some mental effort to really make that transition on how to offend somebody who's hurt you so grievously.
Right.
But then the rebuilding of trust is, okay, is this person trustworthy now? Is this person showing that they're progressing in these victories to have me affirm in them? And if the answer is no, then don't go down that way. You know, if for the sake of your health you need to avoid that completely, that's fine. Now, still get forgiveness, but the rebuilding trust, that's a separate entity.
That's a different beast in itself.
It really is.
So the you know, as an addict, you need to make amends to the community in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, and I do that you know, in my own way. I try to make sure that I am actively making amends, whether people know it or not. It's unnecessary for everybody to know.
Yes.
But there are times when your past comes to you and you have to address it then.
Right.
And what I'm talking about is there was an incident that happened to me this last week where I ran into a guy that I needed to ask for forgiveness and you know, and so the context of this, because I'm going to tell you, you know, what really happened. So I am not a very good person when I'm in full addiction. So let me start there. And I had come across a vehicle at a dealership and I stole it. And, you know, I don't know, as a week later maybe, or a few days later, they caught me, you know, and the guy who was renting it had golf clubs in there, and there was some memories from Scotland that he had also in there, and it was very important to him. And so during that time I had given the car to a couple other guys, and somehow I didn't realize the golf clubs were in there. It doesn't matter, because I'm the one who took it, and so the golf clubs kind of went away, and I went to jail. And while I was in jail, one of the correctional officers approached me and asked me, you know, my friend, you stole my friend's car, and he had some golf clubs in there, and they're not in there anymore. Do you know where they're at? And I didn't, you know, and I didn't really see the significance, because I was a jackass and didn't care.
Well, yeah. Well, in your head you're thinking, just golf clubs. I mean,
right. So I never knew who this person was.
Yeah.
And for years I never, you know, I didn't. I used to think about it though, because it was a violation. Yeah. You know, and so I ran into him last week, and all of a sudden he's like, "Well, what's your name?" You know, and I told him, and he goes, "You're a criminal." And I was like, "Yeah, I have been a criminal in my past." And then that's when he told me that it was his car, and
oh wow,
or not his car, but he had rented the car.
Yeah.
but the significance of the golf clubs. And he started to tell me, that he's like, I lived in fear of you for years. He goes,
Wow.
do you realize the person you look like when you got caught? Because I was on meth and everything else, and then he was like, you look healthy.
Yeah.
And he started to tell me how the significance of these golf clubs and how it almost terrorized him.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that he was afraid of me in a physical way. I think it was more of a mental and emotional,
right,
that he was violated and that he just felt he was in fear that I might come and do this again to him.
Well, the whole idea of feeling violated, the whole fear is based on violation. Well, it's a violation of your safety, a violation of your beliefs, or it's etc. So it makes sense that he's lived in fear that way.
So it gave me an opportunity, and it gave me an opportunity, a unique opportunity, to make amends to somebody who I would have never known or had a relationship with, and it was a very emotional for me.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I realized, I'm like, God, I am so sorry that that you were stuck on this, and that it was a moment for you that changed the way that you feel or see things in life. And as an addict, we don't always understand how we affect other people.
No, well, because your perspective is all right here.
Right.
It's all immediate.
So I was grateful that he was there, and we talked for a while, and he did get all of his stuff back, and so he was glad for that, and I talked to him about the changes that I made, and he talked about some of his stuff and how he I don't want to get completely into detail, but
no, that's fine.
Because I feel like he should remain anonymous for his own, because he knows about these the videos that we've been done, because I talked about that too. I was like, look, I'm trying to make the amends that I can to the community, and I he forgave me right there.
Wow.
Shook my hand.
Wow.
He started talking about, he goes, I hate to say this, but I hated you.
Wow.
And I was so scared of you. And he goes, and now, I feel like, I feel proud of the fact that you have changed your life and that you're going in a different direction. And,
wow.
And so it felt really good to me. It was a very
healing.
It was healing, and it was very confusing for me because
I bet.
Because it was like, I didn't even know that this person was going through this.
Right.
And, and so I didn't know how, there was no way for me to, I knew the act that caused it, but how do you ever really, because I was never told who this person was.
Right.
And so how do you really know how to make those kinds of amends? And I feel like because I'm on the path that I am, that opportunity arose because of that. See, if I was still in addiction, that would have never happened.
No.
And I would have never been able to sorry. And even if I did, I don't know that I would have meant it.
There would have been no meaning in it. It would have been.
But this was a moment for me where I just feel like it was God gave me a release, and it probably wasn't even about me. No. It was about this guy who really deserved to have to be able to release that, because it weighed on him. So it sucks that it weighed on him for so long.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like broken relationships, what people in the community, the addict themselves, the family members, wherever the relationship or whatever the context of a relationship, because of what you did to this individual, you had a relationship with this individual because of how you interacted with him, and so you don't really see that, and when we think of forgiveness and healing, we tend to isolate it and make it about one person,
Right.
instead of realizing how when it comes to relationship, healing in relationships actually affects both people.
Right.
So here's this individual that you had an amazing healing conversation with him,
Yeah.
and
I'm very grateful that I met him. So if he's watching this, I truly appreciate that.
And so what's so fascinating about that is how it was healing to you,
right?
In maybe what you maybe needed in that moment, but then for him to have that same kind of release and healing and be like, wow, look at what has happened in this man's life,
right?
And how releasing it can be to have that exchange,
to let go of that fear and that anxiety and that, that, oh my God, he's, I can't express, how grateful I am that moment happened, because, it showed me also that I have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people in the community that I probably have violated that I don't even know about. You know what I mean?
And I think too, when it talks about healing in the community,
right?
Recognizing that you do not know when you're going to bump into somebody.
No.
You don't know if you're going to hit them up in Walmart or Hy-Vee or the bookstore or the auto repair shop. You have no idea where you're going to bump into anybody.
Right.
And so that kind of, I want to make sure I word this in a way that is appropriate and understanding. But it makes the reason for the individual, for the offender or the addict to continue down that path of victory, continuing over these mountain peaks and proving themselves again and again, and why that needs to be the speed. The quickness of progressing through that is going to vary. I'm not saying you have to do it fast. No. I'm just saying that it's got to be consistent.
Well, this is almost 6 years later.
Yeah. Well, so the consistency has proven,
right?
And so you don't know where you're going to bump into somebody in this process, and so why you have to be consistent, because it is about you. It is about the recovery. It is about the addict proving to themselves, hey, I can accomplish this. But kind of a side effect that I see is, as I'm proving it to myself, I'm in a way I'm doing it, and this is the way I think. I'm proving it to myself, but also for other people. Like it is for me. But then the side glance is, oh man, as I've done this, it's affected that person and it's restored them. Oh look, I've done this and now that person sees me here, and it's healing all around.
Well, it's a gift, I guess, that as you go through and you're able to run into these kinds of people or mend those relationships, it kind of becomes a gift for you, because in my mind, I was, I had to start new, and I wasn't sure that anybody was going to really forgive or want to mend those relationships, and so. And it does take time, and it's going to be on its own timing, and I feel like the things that I handle along the way are only put there when I can handle it. I don't feel like it, right. There are times when I've had things happen where I didn't think I could handle it, and
right.
and I wasn't sure how I was going to do that,
right.
But there was a way. And it was shown to me, whether it was through other people, reading the literature on recovery, or just talking to my sponsor, and or even the community just being like, we know it's rough, we're here.
Right.
Because sometimes that's all you need to get through something, is to know that somebody cares enough that and so you work your way through some of these things. But so for my relationships, there had to be that sincerity in the breach
Right.
of our trust. So there had to be sincerity for it to really open up. And then it was a lot of consistency. And then it was me putting effort into that relationship. Because why should they have to put all the effort and
Right.
be like, well, you're an addict, so, we're going to be timid around you and we're going to try and take it. That's not how
Right.
that would have never helped me,
Right.
But they had to see me actually put that effort back into the relationship because I'm the one who breached it.
Right.
So how could I really think that it's their responsibility to make those efforts?
Right.
Even though at first it was kind of like, I was kind of timid. I don't want to say timid because I wasn't, like.
It's a demeanor thing.
But I was
it's a thought
timid
process.
and so I wasn't sure how to reach out sometimes. And not only that, because you break so many relationships, you have these thoughts in your head that are just that drive you to think
Right.
in a way where it's trying to guide you back into your addiction because there's that little demon in there who just wants you to be getting high so they can just so you have to really manage that part of it, and I hope this makes sense, because at a certain point I really had to start making efforts, and it was my responsibility,
Right.
And when I started making those efforts, along with my consistency and sincerity, their trust started to build again.
Well,
it was really at that point that they could feel like, okay, we can trust him this far, So we were here until I breached it, and then it just takes those little steps, like you said, and it takes time, and I was finally able to really, I feel like my relationship with my mother, because I've done a lot of talk about my relationship with my mother because it's one of the most important relationships I have.
That was a close one when the process all began too.
Right. And so with her, I feel like we're at a point where she doesn't question, there might be that little thought that happens, but she doesn't question it because she trusts me again, and I sometimes feel weird because I'll ask her something or, like, hey, can, you do this or whatever. And I'll feel that little bit of guilt. Like, this is kind of, I would understand if she said no.
Right.
Because that can get into a messy thing where you start to think about, okay, is he back to doing this? Or,
right.
You know what I mean? And so I understand that, that even though our trust is back to this point, it has not, it's still working its way further because, I can't expect her not to have those thoughts. And to be honest, I am glad that she does. Right. Because then she can be like, what's going on? Right. What are you up to?
Well, she has that ability to approach you in that way.
And I might feel like defensive at first, but it's important to have people like that in your life who are going to be like, why are you doing this? This seems like behavior, or are you being sincere in what you're doing here? Or you who keep you in check? People who keep you in check.
And that's not a sign of distrust either.
No,
that is a sign completely that says, hey, I'm affirming my trust.
Right, I trust you and I care about you enough to tell you
I'm
seeing something.
I'm going to call this out so that our what trust we have is accountable.
So, and that's important in an addict's life. So I want everybody to understand that if you do have those thoughts or you do have concerns, that it is okay to express those.
Yes.
Whether the addict or the recovering addict, whatever, whether it doesn't matter how they react.
Right.
What matters is that you point that out so that because sometimes people have a tough time hearing things right away. Like sometimes you have to work through things, and for me, there's like a couple hour process. You
Right.
know, I tend to work through it fairly quickly because I think about it right away. You know, some people it takes days. You know, some people take weeks, and sometimes people just don't understand what you're talking about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But for you and your health and your stability, you need to be able to express that, because those are fears. You know, and if you don't put it out there, you're going to build that fear, and when you start to build that fear, it really runs rapid in your mind, you know,
Yeah.
and you really start to, you can drive yourself kind of to a point where you break. You have a breaking moment where all of a sudden it's like, you know, and it happens,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I've done it where I've didn't want to offend, or I didn't want to come across in a certain way, and then if I was wrong about what I was thinking, then I would be feeling a little embarrassed or
Right.
whatever. Well, you know, I would rather feel a little embarrassed about something than to allow somebody to go down a path that I know is going to be destructive for them.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's
because if you've built that trust back, and that person destructs again, you didn't really fully do your part. Not that you have a part in their recovery,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, as for yourself, if you didn't actually express something, then you start to feel guilty. Like, God, if I would have just said something, you know.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and there's this
Well, and
place you go to, and it's not fair to that person
Yeah.
who is trying to be supportive and everything else for the addict, because that's not their fault.
Well, and this goes back to the honesty,
But it helps.
that having that honesty. We mentioned this
Right.
many times.
Right.
Is having that honesty to openly communicate and say, "Yeah, I'm going to ask you the tough questions. I'm going to do these things," and the goal is, you know, it's about rebuilding that trust, rebuilding that relationship, and offering that forgiveness, so that whether you're the addict or the community around them. The idea is working towards a healthy relationship,
Right.
and being able to not be trapped, and we can trap ourselves in that regards. And so, you know, if for me to be in a healthy place, mentally, spiritually, means I need to say something, then by all means, you know, address it. Hey, I noticed this. Is everything okay? You know, and being able to speak that. And it's not out of a place of distrust. It's not out of a place of an agenda. It can be simply be, hey, I love you. I want what's best for you. I'm noticing this.
Right.
And that's because the idea of mending relationships is it comes down to, do I love this person? With Jesus, he was asked by an expert of the law, and this man asked him, what is the greatest commandment? And the greatest commandment, Jesus responds, he says, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, strength. And then Jesus goes on, he says, the second commandment, the second greatest commandment is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
And I think this whole conversation that we've been having, and these multiple entries that we've been putting into this, is how can we better love our neighbor?
Absolutely.
And do what is necessary. And
not only the community, how can you do it, but the addict as well.
Yes.
That's the goal, is how can you love your neighbor, because you know you're very destructive when you're on these drugs, but when you come off of them, you know, you still feel that destruction, and so you need to make changes in your life. And I wanted to say also that you know, I'm coming from my experience and the things that have happened in my life, you know. That does not mean that everybody else has the same path or has gone through the same things. There may be similar situations, but you know, I don't want people to think that like, oh, this is how you do it. You got to do A, B, C, D. Well, that's not always the way things work.
Well, and that's why I'm glad you're bringing that up, because again, like, we're not coming at this point. It's like, yeah, we're experts. This is how it is. No, this is a good general rule of our experiences, and how we're approaching this, and your stories and people who are watching this, your loved ones who might be involved in this, it is yours. It is unique, and our hope is that you're finding things in these discussions, tools and ideas to equip you on how to navigate what you're going through, or better yet, how to navigate the encounter on the street that you can have, because you have no idea what you're going to get into.
So I like, because my objective through all this is not about the addict.
Right.
I want everybody to kind of understand that my objective is, I want to show you an addict, because that's what I am. I want to show you somebody who's in recovery, because that's what I am. But this objective is about, for me, it's about how can the community heal?
Yes.
And come to a healthy spot in life, because they are not the people who created all of this.
Right.
So it becomes difficult, because you want to point a finger and you want to be like, well, this person offended me, and I fully understand that.
Right.
But you are only holding on to something that is not healthy, whereas the person who did it is probably not.
Yeah.
And plus I feel like if we can all come to a more healthy spot, because forgiveness is a healthy thing to do in life.
Yes.
If we can all come to that healthy spot, it makes, I really honestly feel like it would
benefit.
Well, it would benefit the community, but it would also put this, it's kind of like if you start to trap something,
mm-hmm.
it gets a little more wild because it can't get out of there,
Right.
And so that's kind of what I think. If everybody around is healthy, those addicts, whoever they may be, they're trapped.
Right.
And it closes that space that they can manage their addiction.
Yeah.
And it might push them into a different spot. See, and so I guess maybe I have a second agenda.
No,
because I kind of would like to see less people dying, less people going in full blown addiction.
And to put it this way, we have the one objective of, let's make a stronger, healthier community.
Right.
And let's get the addicts into recovery.
Right.
Let's get healthy as a people, and let's break the chains of addictions that are people being held captive by.
Right. Because it's a very destructive thing in the community. Yeah. It really is, and that was one of the things that that really made me feel like we should reach out to law enforcement.
Which is going to be really fun, because we've discussed this, and we're going to have and correct me. I'm gonna hold his name back just for the sake of when he gets here, we'll introduce him. But it's one of the leading officers in a particular field in our community, and having him join if his schedule allows, and allowing him to bring his perspective into all of this.
Right.
And then also further on down the road, because again, we want to have the community be involved in this, and hear other stories of battles, some in the middle of it, some on the other side of it. But even having individuals who have loved ones in active addiction being a part of this discussion, sharing what they're open to, sharing what they're comfortable. I don't want to pressure somebody to share something they just don't want. I want to respect that.
That takes away like the genuineness of it, So
so I want
to force somebody.
I don't want to force it, but I want those who are listening. I want you all to understand that that we want to bring a community together that is going to peel back the veil of something that's been quite hidden in many different circles of any town, really, of any city, and exposing this. I've been in cities where I was in towns where we would have teens that were heavily addicted to opioids. I mean, I'm talking 11-year-olds, and dealing with that, and dealing with trafficking and all that kind of stuff. And so to peel back these layers and to offer that, again, that the whole anchoring of this whole conversation, a raw conversation to promote healing, to bring it into the open, and to discuss these things. And so it's been really good.
Right. And amends is a very important thing in recovery.
Oh, yeah.
And and you don't always know what those amends are going to be, or it sometimes it's just, I'm sorry, I did something wrong,
right.
And then other times it's actually making up for,
yes.
you took some money from somebody, so pay them back,
Yeah.
and so the recovery process is it's a constant, I don't, today I am working towards being clean. Tomorrow I will work towards being clean. Yeah. The next day I will, it's a lifelong process. And so there are some certain things in there where it says that, you have to be aware. You need to take your own inventory, and you need to be able to say, okay, I did this.
Right.
And it comes back to that whole, you have to be honest with yourself. That to me is probably the very most important part of recovery. Yeah. Is that I can't lie to myself. And so it's helpful when somebody else will say something, and then I can process it, but it's the most important thing, because if I can't be honest with myself, then I'm not, I will deny something, right. Or whatever that could cause me to go back into, take a left turn. Well, as a right turn, but take a left turn, and be back on my on the horse, and so and in being honest with myself, I have to really address those things that that scare me, because I know I've done some things wrong, right? And so it's scary to be like, you really have to be honest with yourself and be like, okay, I need to really address this. Yeah. And there's fear, about it, how are they going to react? And there's anxiety because, maybe they might react wrong. And then, but if you carry that, it's going to, it will eat at you, and the weird thing is that, there were certain things that ate at me at first. Right. And so I addressed those. And as I go along, there are other things that come up that I forgot about, or I didn't realize. Yeah. And so then I can address those along the way, and it becomes this, this whole idea. Like I said, I feel like God does not put more on my plate than I can handle. Yeah. He gives them to me, and as I'm going along this path, and and that whole, I'm just so grateful for this guy coming to me and really just putting it out there. Yeah. Because I would not have understood the depth, how the depth of his, how it affected him. Right. And so I'm grateful for that, because it made me realize that I really need to. I need to reevaluate some of those things that I may have done that I am not, So it was just a gratitude kind of moment. Yeah. And I just I don't even know what to say about it. But so the other part is that, like I said, I felt like we should bring law enforcement in here just so that, because they have a different perspective. Oh, absolutely. And not only that, I feel like, even though my violations were not directly to law enforcement, they probably deserve some sort of apology. Mm-hmm. Because I was a mess, and they really had to. I'm telling you, I was not very nice, and not only to the police officers, but the correctional officers in the jail. Oh yeah, they hated me in that jail because I I would come in and I had been up for days and just wound up, and and I would just I said and did some things that were just not okay.
Yeah.
And so so for me, I feel like it might be a moment where I can kind of try to understand them a little better, and maybe bridge that relationship so that I can kind of go through that, so it's kind of selfish for me, at the same time, I also think that people need to understand, because what happens is that you love this addict,
right,
and they are doing things, and so then they get arrested. Well, I know that my family and some of my friends really had a problem with law enforcement,
right?
Because it's like, why are you taking my son? I mean, we know, but you don't have to be so this or that, and the system is broke, and and there are some things in the system that are definitely broke, but that's not what we're about. We're talking about how to heal. Well, part of healing is understanding that law enforcement is not doing. They're not arresting these addicts out of malicious intent. They're arresting them because those people are doing something wrong, and there are some who really truly care, and that's why I wanted to bring in the particular person, because I believe that I honestly believe that his agenda is not to just throw him away and lock him up. I feel, and because he's helped people that are close to me now. Yeah. I feel like his agenda is really more about how can we heal and how can we help and what can we do to maybe get this person so that they don't have to go sit in prison, or they don't have to, just go down this ugly path that most addicts go down.
Well, and I think it's gonna be really good to hear his heart.
Right.
And then I think for individuals in our community, humanizing these individuals, humanizing the police force. Because I think in our nation right now too, there's a lot of animosity against law enforcement, and we have to remember that these are individuals who love people. Right. They love their cities, they love their communities, they love their nation, and they enlist. And they join up and they get trained because deep down they want to serve.
Sure. And they want to help.
And they want to help. Yeah. And I think having that perspective, and then how healing will that conversation be next time between you and him, or as a whole, what kind of interesting. And I'm really looking forward to that discussion. Right. I think it's going to be might be, like I said, by the way,
might not go the way I think.
Listen, these are never scripted, by the way. That's why we mean by raw, no script. And we say things. But I think that's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be really fun. It might be a little bit intimidating at first, but I think that as we go along, it's going to be a really amazing experience. So looking forward to that.
Right. And I think that, I think that what happens is that, people get, calloused, because when you see something happening over and over and over, you start to just feel like nobody's any good.
Right.
And so if I could pull you out of that to understand that they are good people under this umbrella of addiction. Most are very good people and just have a real problem, and and the same with those who feel hateful and everything else. They are good people in the community. They something happened, and they don't deserve to be looked at like, hey, you know what, you're a hateful person, get out of here. That's no, we need to be able to build everybody up, in this situation, because otherwise we can't address addiction at its worst.
There's a passage in scripture that says, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of many will grow cold. And that's what people behave a certain way, and people we're gonna stop loving them. We're gonna become callous.
What scripture is that?
I forget the reference, and I apologize.
Well, can you send that to me?
I will send that to you.
Because
and I'll probably add that verse into the description once I find it, so that those who listen are like, well, he said that verse.
Yeah.
Because the increase of wickedness, the love of many will grow cold.
I love
that. And that makes sense. What are we doing? We are trying to remind people that just because wickedness seems to be increasing in individuals' lives, that does not give us the excuse to let go of our love. And so what can we do to
and your love for yourself too? You know, it ain't just them, but your love for yourself. Because if you allow that wickedness to really kind of take over, it becomes something in you.
Yeah.
You know, and I really feel like in the world that what you put out there kind of comes back to you. So, you know, the more wicked you are, the more wicked you get. You know what I mean? And it's just it's like an infection, a disease, you know, a virus that just, you know, that goes out, you know, because I've noticed that in my life, the more I do that is putting something out there that is good, the more good that continuously comes back to me. And you know, whether it's things and finance, but to me the more important part is it comes back to me in gifts of love and that feeling of gratitude, you know, because that's, you know, that's things you can't replace, and it replenishes itself. You know, the more I give it away, the more I get it back. And it's an insane way to me. You know, it was really foreign to me to understand that whole process. But there came a time when all of a sudden, you know, and I did little things, and they would come back, and I was like, God, that was kind of weird. You know, and then the more I did, the more it came back, and the more I realized that, you know, this is about me giving, you know, because I receive it back in tenfold. And God is great in that way where he recognizes, you know, and it may not be immediately and on my time, but he recognizes and he gives it back.
Yes.
And that is a truth that I have found that that I you know, I don't, it's a truth I found, and I find so much gratitude and feel so good about that whole process and idea, and I wish for everyone to understand that and to feel that, you know. But there's a long road.
There is. Well, I think this is for the sake of time, I just saw what time it was. So we're going to, and I want to conclude on this note, because this is a great note to conclude this session on. This is a lengthier one, and if you stuck with it this long, thank you so much. And I hope that you enjoyed it. But
we're full of
But that wonderful idea that just with God's economy, if I'm gonna give out this love, I'm gonna give out this forgiveness, I'm gonna give out this appreciation, that I will receive it back as well. And then you're absolutely right. This is something that's not instantaneous. It does take time. And so if you're in the midst and someone on this journey of this time of healing and restoration, then praise God. I'm glad you keep moving forward. Keep going for that victory. If you're just starting out, buckle up. It's a good ride, but it's a great ride. It's a tough one. It's a long one, but it's worth it. And then and for those who are reaping the benefits of that restored trust, we praise God for your testimony. And so we will look forward to seeing you next time, or rather you see us. And God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part. We'll talk to you later.